Hello and welcome to the Try It Kitchen, where I, your host Sam, make recipes I've saved that I've never tried before. Today, we'll be making baked crepes from the King Arthur's Flour magazine, Sift. Our recipe starts by adding 3 eggs, half a teaspoon of salt, and 1 3/4 cup of milk to a food processor, already a deviation from the original recipe, which called for a blender. Nevertheless, we blend the mixture until smooth. We then add a cup and a half of flour to the mixture and blend for 20 seconds. We then stream in 3.5 ounces or 7 tablespoons of melted butter and blend for 10 seconds before setting aside for at least 20 minutes. Now, we need to chop 1 pound of mushrooms, the recipe recommending either cremini or white mushrooms. I chose white mushrooms in my case. I also wash these before chopping, as it's easier than scraping and, contrary to popular belief, does not add additional moisture. Now, in a pan with melted butter, we cook our mushrooms on medium to medium-high heat, giving them a generous amount of salt to draw out their moisture. As you can see, the liquid has a dark color, but don't worry, this is normal. Just keep cooking until it's all evaporated, turning up the heat if needed. Now that all the liquid is evaporated, we can add in our thyme. The recipe says to use a teaspoon, but because I am a proponent of measuring with your heart, I couldn't tell you the exact amount I added. Either way, once your thyme is mixed in, you need to taste for seasoning. With this, it's time to make the crepes. There's many ways to cook them, but here's what works for me. Brush a cold 8-inch pan with melted butter, pour a 1/4 cup of batter, and turn the heat to medium before swirling the pan so the batter can coat the bottom. When the edges are crispy, we then turn off the heat and flip, finishing off the crepe with the residual heat. It's traditional to use your fingers, but if you're temperature sensitive or scared of burning yourself, like me, a spatula works just as well. Then repeat this process with the rest of the batter. Pour in a 1/4 cup, swirl, turn off the heat, flip, repeat, brushing with butter when necessary. Once all the crepes are done, the pan or pans you use need to be greased to avoid stickage. I use leftover melted butter from cooking to do this. To assemble, we spread about a teaspoon of Dijon mustard, spoon some of our mushrooms down the middle, and lay down our ham. You can use more than I did, and I recommend tearing it up if it won't fit on the crepe. With the stuffing done, we then roll up the crepe tightly, laying it down in our pan and repeating the process with the rest. We then wrap our pan in aluminum foil and bake our crepes at 350 degrees for 20 minutes. While that's baking, we grate 5 ounces of gruyere cheese. Then, we head to the stove and melt 2 tablespoons of melted butter. Once the butter is melted, we then whisk in 2 tablespoons of flour until fragrant. It's at this point that we add 1 1/4 cup of milk. The recipe says that the milk needs to be warmed, but that is not how I learned to make this sauce. I learned from fellow YouTuber Chef John that if your milk is cold and your roux, which is the flour and butter mixture, is very hot, then you won't have any lumps. Just keep whisking until your roux dissolves. We then add the cheese. Simply dump it in and whisk it into the liquid, continuing to whisk until it is thickened like this. Now it's time to pour the sauce over our crepes. Please spread out your sauce or pour it over with a spoon, because if you do what I did, your crepes will burn before the sauce can brown under the broiler. I have to say, however, that this is one of the best things I've ever made. Even when I couldn't brown the sauce, the mushrooms are savory and fragrant from the thyme, going perfectly with the sweet ham I used, and the Dijon adds a certain amount of zest, all of this wrapped up in a perfectly textured crepe. However, this is also one of the most labor-intensive things I've ever made. I would recommend you make this only if you have a lot of time on your hands and want to impress someone. It is very much a special occasion dish. With that, don't forget to taste for salt.